time, if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourselves in chat, that'll be great. So if everybody knows who's here, because hopefully we'll have this be as interactive as possible. So please introduce yourselves in chat and where you're coming in from. And we'll start in 2 minutes.
Yay, Danny's in.
Welcome, everyone.
Fantastic. A lot of leaders and university people. Welcome all.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great mix. We're looking for hopefully the opportunity to share different perspectives on the process. So hopefully you'll keep your fingers poised on the chat button so we can engage accordingly. Again, welcome everyone. We'll be starting shortly. And feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in chat. Just as somebody joined from Spiro, Oklahoma. I didn't know there was a Spiro, Oklahoma.
I was wondering if it was your hometown.
Right.
Are you from there, Ken?
Where we hail from. Not really. Okay, we'll start in just 30 more seconds. Appreciate your patience, everyone, and thank you all for introducing yourselves. Okay. Welcome again. It is my name is Ken Spiro, from founder and president of School Sims. On behalf of the team at School Sims, I'm delighted to welcome you to this month's webinar, and in particular this one because it's done in collaboration with Learning Forward and Kay Psencik, who is with us to facilitate, who we'll get to in a moment. And one thing about, I have been speaking with Fred Brown, the current CEO of Learning Forward, for quite a number of years, actually. And we aligned on our thinking and finally found a project to collaborate on. And it has been quite delightful. I mean, the fact is that when one thinks about what Learning Forward stands for, which is the learning leader, which is professional learning, the importance of professional learning, it is so well aligned with what we do, because fundamentally, and especially in this topic area of equity-centered leadership, at its core, it's really about skilling leaders to be able to respond to new situations that they've never faced before, right? Everything's unprecedented until you experience it, and we experience new things every day. And at the end of the day, as educators, right, our most important goal, I believe, or certainly in the top three, is going to be to enable students to have a love of learning, because that creates the opportunity for lifelong learning. That creates the opportunity to learn what they need to know now, but have the ability to extrapolate into other areas as they get older. And that obviously applies not just to our students, it applies to our students at every level, right? To adults as well. And that's really what simulation is all about. Simulation is about creating a love and engagement in a learning process. As we know from healthcare and from aviation and from the military, right? And from an engagement perspective, simulation is a key tool in terms of enabling people to experience new things. But the opportunity to engage in creating that opportunity for a teacher to enable that student to grow that love of learning, or to enable that leader, to enable that teacher to enjoy what they're doing so much that they continue to enable their students to have a love of learning, and for themselves to be able to focus on issues that they've never faced before, a parent with an issue that they've never faced before, a staff member who comes and presents something they never faced before, with the approach that says, I'm going to figure out, I'm going to listen on the one hand, because other people have perspectives that I may not have that are important for me to listen to, and I'm going to learn new ways of doing things, because what I read in the book, the class that I took, whatever it is that happened in my apprenticeship, right, didn't prepare me for this specific event. I need to work my way through it. And so the opportunity to engage in this kind of circumstance, dealing with equity-centered leadership, which is rife with trade-offs. We have to it's not going to be clear what the right thing to do is. We have to be able to evaluate between trade-offs to understand there are different ways of doing things. There are different students, there are different stakeholders, there are different needs at play. The way we do that is through critical thinking and by being a learning leader. And so when we had this opportunity to engage with Learning Forward on this and to work with Kay, it was something that I was very excited about, and we are delighted to share this with you. And so with that, I'd like to we'll come back to talking a little bit more about school sims, but really want to get you into hearing from Kay in terms of Learning Forward's perspective on equity-centered leadership, how it manifested into it is part of the broader solution that they're developing, what the role that the simulation could have, and actually have you engage in the simulation about this topic, and do it collectively, do it collaboratively with the folks that we have here together, because we have a wonderful group of both practitioners and also educators, higher ed, some of you former practitioners, but the opportunity to come at this from all these different angles and to wrestle with what good decision-making in being an equity-centered leader can mean. That's what we're here to get started. And obviously we're not going to solve the problem, but this is hopefully putting us in a direction to do that. For those of you who don't know of Kay, Kay's been at Learning Forward. She's been in education for decades. She's literally written books on coaching. She wrote the book on learning systems as part of Learning Forward's library of content. And she was our lead partner in developing this simulation. So with that, I will turn it over to Kay, and I will shut up.
Thank you so much, Ken. And I am so excited to be here. Actually, I feel like I am still a learner in our work in simulations, and I look forward to learning from you today as we experience the simulation that we created. So as Ken said, I have worked with principals for a good 30 years as deputy superintendent in school district in Texas, and for 20 years in supporting principals through Learning Forward, and have had wonderful opportunities to work with Fred Brown to partner on facilitation of learning for principals and to try to find effective learning designs that engage principals in their own learning. And this simulation is one of the most exciting tools that I've had the opportunity to work with. So I want to thank Ken for both inviting me to be here today, and secondly, for partnering with us in the work. So I want you to leave with the excitement about simulations and be eager to maybe explore other opportunities and ways. I use many simulations that Ken had produced through school sims, and some of them were from universities and some of them from school districts that were used in their programs to help strengthen what people are learning in authentic ways. So I'm going to talk just a few minutes about equity itself and all of you are experienced and knowledgeable about that. And secondly, about professional learning for principals. And then, as Ken said, we're going to experience the sim and let you play with the whole concept of making decisions through a process of simulation. So this picture on the left is very familiar to us. I don't know why it's always bothered me, but it was actually through the simulation that I began to realize what bothers me about it. We want to help students see well, but we scaffold them to look over the fence and that picture. And really if you look at Learning Forward standards for professional learning, there are 3 standards that actually focus on equity practices, equity drivers, and equity foundations. And all of them lead to this concept of both adults and students in the game, valued, cared for, contributing their gifts, and being a part of the whole learning community that exists in a school community. And so as Fred and I have worked together, we've been working on what are the ways that principals learn from each other. And maybe not in your world, but the world I come from, principals are still very isolated. They may be in groups, but they're often attending meetings, and their job is to figure out as a group how to implement something someone else is sending to them. What we know is that is not really helpful many times to the issues that school principals are facing. And so we are learning that by engaging principals in authentic communities of practice or communities of learners in which they focus on their own issues in their school, using their own data about their staff's learning and about their students' performance, that problem of practice becomes intriguing to them and holds their attention. And through that, they're willing to try and experiment with what we know from the research and what we know from our standards. So as we were creating our sim, we thought, number one, how do principals use the standards for professional learning to design the learning for themselves as a learning community and for their faculty? And how do they build a climate that fosters and facilitates learning for all? So we also grounded our work on from the work by Grissom on how principals affect students in schools. And we really want to be sure that our sim helps them explore those when they're making decisions. And so that simulation is a very robust learning design. And I will share with you at the end, after a little practice with it, what the principals who've used it have to say about the application of the sim in their own learning. So I put in, what is our simulation? It's grounded in the standards for professional learning, and particularly important leadership, equity foundations, and equity practices, and effective leadership practices, the PSEL standards, and in the findings of the Grissom report on how principals affect students and schools. So the simulation, as with all of them, give teams of principals the opportunity to consider decisions related to equity issues, because this is a first sim, and that climate that we want to build in which all people are engaged in the learning in the game, not looking over the fence, and that they would have to make choices about critical decisions along the way that would be grounded in their understanding of the standards and those studies we talked about. So teams had the opportunity, and you will too, to discuss the consequences of their choices in the situation, to explore different ways of looking at those decisions that they made that would lead to more profound understanding of the issues in their schools, and for them to make a more thoughtful, reflective decision. The way a principal's life is in a day, they're making hundreds of decisions all day long, and often many of them based on past practices or what they've watched somebody else do, not necessarily grounded in thinking about the research that is there to help them grow and learn. So we're going to have fun. We're going to experience the simulation. So, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to play the simulation for you. And when it comes to a decision point, I'm going to ask you to make an individual decision. So you won't be grouped with anybody for a while. And I'm going to give you a little time to think about those tools that I just talked about. What would the research say the best choice would be here? And Ken laughed at me actually several times, because I've taken the sim so many times and I sometimes answer them in different ways. And he said, well, isn't that the point? That the context in which you're working right now, or the people you're working with, may change the outcome of what you choose at this point in time. But it still was sort of an interesting thing that where I was in my life also made a difference in what the choices are. And that's how you're going to find it, I think, too. The context of some of you are leadership coaches, some of you are professors. You're going to relate to the decisions a lot from your perspective and what you do. So I'm going to give you it's going to seem a little long because it's going to be quiet time, and I want you to make notes about your rationale. And then we're going to put you in groups, and you're going to have that same experience. You're going to talk about what choice you made, why you made it, And everybody's getting an opportunity to share so that that rich conversation happens around the situation, the research, the findings, you're thinking about it. So if we're ready to go, everybody has pen in hand or some way to be thoughtful in taking your notes, ready for the conversation. We're going to begin. Everybody ready? Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, here we go. Now, this is just a welcome. It says pretty much what Ken said and what I shared with you about the informed pieces of work. So we're just setting the stage for the things that we're going to do. And here we go.
In this simulation, you are the principal of Juniper Middle School, where overall trends seem to be going in the right direction. However, a concerning trend is that students of color are underperforming and not making progress in critical content areas. A significant number of students of color are also being over-identified for special services and are also disproportionately engaged in disciplinary measures. You will deal with perceptions and biases that tend to cause students of color to feel disenfranchised and maybe limiting their potential. We hope this experience will offer you insights to apply in your practice.
Context. For the past 2 years, you have been the principal of Juniper Middle School, the fastest growing school in your district. Much of this growth is a function of an expanding city center and increasing population density in your school district. The faculty and staff at Juniper Middle School have been relatively static for the past 5 years, and the majority of teachers have over 6 years in their present jobs. Emerging trends. During the summer months in preparation for the coming school year, you have been reviewing summative data. Overall, the school seems to be doing well with general trends going in the right direction. However, as you dig deeper, you uncover another story. Students of color, a growing percent of Juniper's population, are underperforming and not making progress or growth in significant content areas. It appears that they receive a disproportionate share of special services, making your participation significantly higher than the national norms. They are also engaged in more disciplinary measures than their counterparts. In summary, you are concerned about the growing gap between students of color and their counterparts at Juniper, especially with your 7th grade team and your math students. Perspectives. You consider your own perspective. Students of color are struggling. You have engaged with them on many levels and are extremely troubled by the fact that students who often show up in your office are students of color. When you visit with them, they don't feel valued or appreciated for their talents and what they have to offer. Their perception is they are rarely called on to participate and are often grouped with other students who are not performing. They are also disillusioned with low-level expectations. You often hear, "My teacher doesn't think I can do it." In reality, students do not seem to have a personal connection with staff members. You feel an urgent need to deal with this growing trend now, but realize that how you do this will most assuredly influence the outcomes. How will you approach this issue? Work directly with the faculty and staff. Develop an agenda for a school year kickoff meeting that would ask teachers to engage in a thoughtful analysis of the data and be reflective of school practices that may contribute to gaps in achievement. Then, have them consider possible annual learning goals for students and adults. Discuss the issue and develop a plan with your supervisor. Engage with your supervisor in order to develop a game plan for how to move forward. Encourage self-discovery. You feel uncomfortable sharing data that challenges your leadership for the past few years and challenges your own perspectives. Provide the faculty and staff with the data and they will come to recognize the issues. Engage the building leadership team. Design an agenda for the leadership team to examine student performance data from the last few years by subgroups. Performance data, behavior data, attendance data, attitudinal data, and parent survey data to determine possible causal factors.
Okay, this is your time to think about your choice and think why, your justification. Okay, now we're going to move into small groups, and what I want you to do is justify your response in your group so that you actually have a conversation about what you think is really the best choice. Now, remember, in this work, there's no right answer. So that whole idea of feeling confident about your choice is what we want to do. Would you please group them, Nick? All right, now I'm unmuted. All right, I kept trying. So what I want to show you now is what Ken wanted me to show you a while ago. Is that for each one of these choices, there are consequences for each of them. And in the development of the sim, that was kind of the most interesting part. So I was in 2 breakout rooms, and when we were talking about, well, I really think we should start with the building leadership team. So when I hit on the little icon on the left, it tells us a little bit more. Design an agenda for the leadership team to examine student performance data for the last few years by subgroups to determine possible causal factors. Or if I hit on work directly, it's going to give me a little bit more information before I make a decision. But what I wanted you to do is think about it from what you're learning, because that's what I challenge the principals to do. Think about what you're learning, then make a choice. So these are little hints, and you sort of had some as you went along. You had some of these, and some of you are talking about directly working with the faculty. I want you to keep remembering there's not one right answer. But when we built the sim, we did say engage the building leadership team. So we would submit that, and it's going to take us
Working with the leadership team. You call a meeting to engage the leadership team, consisting of you, the coach, and the teachers from the various aspects of the school, and examining data from the last 3 years. The data is of student performance by subgroups, performance, behavior, attendance, attitudinal, and parent survey, to determine possible causal factors that the school can control and discover possible exciting opportunities to determine specific SMART goals for the end of the year. The leadership team quickly recognized the growing gap in student performance and note that the underperformance is most acute in the growing African American subgroup. Teacher bulks. Following your review of data, you approach one of your teachers, Mr. Wilson, about data trends associated with math students.
I've seen the data, but it doesn't reflect attitudes. The students today just don't seem to care. They don't engage. They don't really try. It really won't matter if we adjust or try new things. Change will only occur when they decide to put in the time and effort. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Fired.
Want to explore different approaches of working with your faculty to help them find value in their own learning and trust that what they learn really will positively impact student outcomes. You feel challenged to identify annual learning goals for the faculty and staff and how to best assist a team that is simply not accepting responsibility for their students' learning. Which approach will you pursue? Host conversations to gather more information before setting goals. You and the leadership team host conversations with faculty and students to gather more information about the growing performance gap. Have individual conversations with each teacher about their need to take responsibility for their students' performance. Express concern and dissatisfaction where appropriate that some aren't taking their responsibility for student performance or their own professional development more seriously. Use a coaching approach to engage the teachers in reflecting on their own responsibilities in student success. Leverage collective inquiry to engage teachers in thinking about the possibilities and options they have for increasing their own effectiveness. Send the instructional coach in to fix the problem. You feel that a hands-off approach is best. Have the coach report in once a week on progress being made.
Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. It's quiet time. Be thoughtful about your choice. Suggest why you would make that choice, your justification. I'll give you a few minutes. And then we're going to spend about 7 minutes in the breakout room this time, Nick, so that we have a little longer conversation.
And one thing to note when you're writing down your choice now is that if you don't see your choice there or what you would do, And write that down too, because that is something that, we're trying to not limit the thinking by offering choices. These are going to be stylistically different in terms of addressing the trade-offs that are at play. And if you have different ideas, there's a lot to be discussed. And the opportunity to have that come up in the breakouts is an important part of the process as well.
Thanks, Ken. Absolutely. When we see that young man again, several principals had choices that were not in the list for him. Okay. So I heard some really great comments in the room that I was in. So I would love for somebody, and why don't we use chat too? If some of you would like to make some comments in the chat box about what your conversations were about, that would be really helpful too. So who would like to actually make a comment? Okay, Tina from North Carolina, I heard your comments and I would love for you to share them. Would you unmute, please?
Okay, Miss K. So, what I felt was that we had needed to have a differentiated approach. So depending on who you were about to engage, for example, if you were engaging the person that had the attitude that the simulation shared with us, they may need more of a coaching approach. New teachers may need more of some individual support and the assistance of an instructional coach. A group of teachers who may be already kind of doing well with their groups, reaching all their learners, they may need to have some individual support to find out kind of what's working, what changes that they might have. So as the administrator, you should know the capacity of the people in your building, and you have to approach them differently.
Perfect, wonderful. I see that chat room 7 really also sort of selected that whole idea of a coaching approach or a more personalized approach. Do you have something to add to that conversation? I'm not sure who was in that group, but chat room 7.
I'll comment. Those of us who spoke, I like the idea of using a coaching approach. And I think what happens when you use a coaching approach is you remove that whole notion of blame, and it becomes an issue of empowerment for the teacher. That the teacher feels, oh, I can make a difference. Regardless of personal feelings they may have, but toward a particular group, if they feel empowered, if they feel like they have the tools to make a difference, then in most cases, teachers will.
Yeah, that's a beautiful justification too. The whole idea of teachers want to do a good job. And when coached, they have a better opportunity to be themselves and to be more reflective about their practice instead of sort of threatened by the data. Awesome. Tom, you have your hand.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We were talking in our group, we were talking about the need to gather more information, really, because, for example, although a coaching approach might ultimately be part of our solution, right, we really don't know yet why we have these outcomes. We haven't really addressed that yet. And therefore, for example, one thing we might want to do is do some, have some focus groups with parents and children, or do some surveying of the community, and talk about parental perceptions of why we have these outcomes. You know, because so far, you know, we've heard from the teachers, and they have their own ideas, but If kids aren't interested, well, why aren't they interested? We need to
Yeah.
get to that first, I think.
That's an awesome idea too. Take the time to know your parents and your students and to get perspectives and to help understand why the data shows up the way it is before we make any action. That's also part of that wonderful way of trying to see what the data is telling us in multiple ways. Great. Someone else, room 1, Sandra, you have something you want to share as well?
It's similar to what everyone else had said about the getting some data first. We talked about having conversations first. And one rationale I gave was just the matter of time.
Mhm.
Leaders have such limited time that we thought just kind of distributing the conversation so we can get everybody's voice in that among the leadership team, and having these focus groups or however we want those conversations to be would help us to get to some of the root causes and give everybody a voice in the situation. But we did agree that ultimately, as we try to change some mindsets, et cetera, we want to have some coaching conversations.
Perfect. So, and by the way, that's a huge standard. That's part of the standard on equity practices, is that whole notion of all voices involved, everybody's participating and everybody's heard, and their conversations matter. Excellent conversations, everybody. Anita also had a great comment. So we'll kind of think about this section unless someone else wants to really add to this conversation. We'll try another section of this, but Anita, are you there? Can you add what you said about the data as well? Okay, well, she may not be with us right now, but she was talking about that same kind of thing of looking at multiple forms of data and not being in too big a hurry to really make judgments. And someone put it here, Deborah did too, the sort of blaming each other or blaming the situation or blaming the students or blaming their parents, which we know sometimes happens, but using data in multiple ways to help us really understand the situation. She did a much better job of sharing that than I did. So would someone else like the final word on this decision? Okay, well, I'm going to check this time using coaching, because that's what many of you at least included in some of that conversation. So we'll see what happens here.
Using collective inquiry. You decide to use collective inquiry as an approach to engaging several of your teaching teams in thinking about the possibilities and options they have for increasing their individual effectiveness. Many seem to enjoy the process, but several of your teams don't seem enamored of the process. They get bogged down and become stuck in their thinking. As this occurs, you ask probing questions. Your goal is to get them excited about their work again. Rising concern. You begin to more clearly see several concerning patterns. First, you are concerned with the low expectations that certain teachers and teams persist in holding for their students and how they consistently blame low student apathy for the growing gap. Even in database discussions, some persist in blaming the students. Well, they never come to class with their homework done. What can we expect? They are always acting out in class, hardly ever participating. Their parents just don't care. When I call home, no one ever calls me back. We are just getting more and more of those students. What do you expect us to do? Second, you realize that most teachers don't take their personal development very seriously, nor do they seem to understand the link between it and student performance. It appears that you have your work cut out for you. Your efforts to help teachers become increasingly aware of and identify reasons for the decline in the performance of students of color have been somewhat frustrating. As you try to engage them in developing annual learning goals, you've come to realize that others on the school staff may likewise not be holding high expectations for all students. You decide to ask the coach and your leadership team to work with the faculty in professional learning on the importance of high expectations and strategies to engage all students. In observing your teaching teams, you realize that some of your faculty may feel helpless and ill-prepared to teach students in ways that capture their changing interests. You want to explore different ways to encourage ownership and commitment to change and help teachers become more engaging. How might you engage the faculty in collective inquiry to discover creative solutions? Do nothing at this point. Give teachers some breathing room. Allow the teachers more time to implement new skills acquired as a result of the recent professional development. Host a meeting with students and their parents about student performance. Encourage everyone to increase their commitment and put more effort into their education. Create a learning plan with each member of the team. Articulate short and intermediate professional learning goals that ensure application of acquired skills in the classroom. Maybe it's time to take disciplinary action. Some of your most senior teachers show high levels of resistance to change. Put each of them on a corrective action plan that ties their performance to student performance improvements. Okay, take a few minutes to make your choice and write your justifications. Nick, I think we better try 5 minutes on this one. We'll come back and have a similar conversation. And then we'll pause on the simulation and make sure I have a few closing remarks I want to make, and so does Ken. I just heard some wonderful conversations in the 2 rooms that I attended. So I love the way you sort of engaged into the questions and made your own options in many classes. So please use the chat box because it's a great way for a lot of you to share. But we'd love some comments from your conversations. What were some of the things that were important to your group? Well, I'm going to ask Lee to share then. I'll just keep calling on people I heard. Lee, I love that quote that you said, creating a culture of academic optimism. That is beautiful.
That's good old Wayne Hoy. That comes from Dr. Hoy. So that's Wayne Hoy.
He said in this situation. Okay, go ahead. Share what you all talked about, Lee.
Oh, we didn't really like any of the responses that we could choose because, you know, you have a staff that's operating with a deficit mindset potentially. And as our colleague indicated, we don't know if it's a will issue or a skill issue. But very often, I think when our student body changes potentially, staff cannot understand what to do. And the thing I mentioned is the leader really needs to look at the culture and climate of the school and really see what they need to do to work to create that culture of academic optimism where they believe in the kids and that the kids can learn at high levels. So.
Yes, what I loved about that, as Ken said, you made your own choice here, but it points to the point of this sim. This is about the leader building a climate and a culture in which people flourish, students and staff. And what we find is principals are confronted with many situations like this. And what do they do as leaders to help reshape that culture or that climate? So I so appreciate you sharing that comment. And in that same group was Paul, and I loved your comment too. Do you mind commenting as well?
Oh, I made a lot of comments.
Well, what I heard.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
I had mentioned the will and the skill. We don't know that. Oh, I'd mentioned about the leader reflecting, right? Reflecting on their own behavior, because if you have so many staff that are don't feel that they can do something, that they have low self-efficacy and they have low response efficacy, they don't know if they could do it, or even if they do it, that they can produce that outcome. So I think that, you know, again, we have to figure out, is it a skill deficit or will deficit? If it's skill deficit, then okay, we got to train. It's a will deficit. Hey, are we observing? Are we giving feedback? How often are we giving feedback? Are we giving reinforcing feedback? Are we correcting more? Are we shaping, you know, progressively shaping them in the right direction? So, but I agree with the climate, the culture piece of it. I look at culture, shared behavior, and climate, shared perception. So we got to have measures of that. Do we even know how people are feeling about the way things are going around and how I'm doing as a leader? Without that, then, you know, how are we going to shape that?
Yeah, beautifully said. So we're going to pause with this right now. And we're going to go back to the slides. And
While Kay is calling that, I'll just let you know. So we're going to pause just for those of you who need to leave at the top of the hour, so we kind of wrap this up. But then we'll stay and continue to play the sim for those of you who want to stay. So again, we just wanted to, for those of you who just have the hour, make sure that we get to a point, that we can close. But if you're interested in staying, we are happy to stay to continue on and engaging with the sim. So, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm struggling here a little bit to close this out the way to get back to my slides, but I'm going to share exactly what we learned. And then I'm really going to find this, but it's not coming up right now, so I don't know where it went. But one of the exciting things was that participants experienced many of the things that you talked about. And they, thank you. Perfect. They loved the opportunity to actually discuss. I'm closing this out. Okay. No way. Nope. Do it again, Nick. I'm sorry. They loved the conversation. They didn't care what the answer was, but they wanted to share with each other what they were thinking and what they were learning. And that mattered to them. Here we are. Sorry, I found it. So they also believed that it caused them to pause and be very reflective about what was going on in their school right now and about situations they were experiencing. And because they got to talk with each other, they really enjoyed looking at different perspectives. And they said it never happens for them. They're making a decision with their leadership team or in their school, but actually talking about the issues they were facing ahead of time and making a decision in a non-threatening way because they're not with their staff and faculty, and how that would actually help them understand a little bit about their experiences and how to apply what they were learning. So they loved the actual experience of using the sim. At the end of the entire sim, there are feedback comments about the choices that they made. So they actually get a report back of how the choices they made would possibly lead to certain consequences, because the context and all might be different, and how those issues might be playing out differently if they made different choices. That was really powerful. And I'm going to say that it's a tremendous learning experience with me. I had a principal say, would you help us develop a sim at our school with our leadership team so we could actually have the same experience in a smaller scale, but with issues that we're facing? And I got to thinking, this is a powerful way for all of us to learn. So a group of people working on developing a sim, it's a powerful learning experience in and of itself. So I not only had to create the learning story, but thinking of all the consequences that happen to principals on a daily basis, and thinking about other options that might be more favorable for them to do. So again, it was a fantastic learning journey. Fred and I are considering an extension of this where a principal would know this information about this climate and begin to focus on curriculum instruction and assessment. So that's sort of our next adventure with Ken. And I have to thank him, the tools and all the support that we had in developing the sim was really powerful. So Ken, thank you. Now I'll turn it back to you.
You are welcome. And it was a pleasure working with you as well. And really just to, before, again, turn over the top of the hour, first of all, just make this offer. Anybody interested in by attending, we are happy to extend a discount in terms of the annual subscription to the Sims. The library is now over 40 simulations. And so if you just use the QR code, you can get access to that. And we'd certainly love to chat with you further. And as Kay mentioned, this is the way that we also expand the library, and simulation is the gift that keeps on giving. It's beneficial to participate in a sim. It's beneficial to lead a sim for those of you who are faculty or leading in your districts. It's also a learning opportunity to create them, because if you have to unpack a problem to its core components, which is not just label the problem, right? We can call a problem equity, But that doesn't necessarily mean on the ground, at the granular level, when I'm making decisions, what is it that I'm wrestling with? What are those things? Because we can't call that equity, because there's going to be different versions of equity in terms of the decision that we're making, and having to unpack that in a manner which can be simulated is beneficial as well. And so the process is one, and again, it's something that we're interested in speaking with anybody who's got. I know there's no shortage of really good stories out there, because you really can't make any of this stuff up. But if that's of interest, by all means, we're interested in hearing as well. But again, the goal of a sim is not the product. It's what it enables. It's the experience that your students have. We don't really care. The sim doesn't care if you finish it, but the opportunity to engage with peers, whether they're in the same district, whether you're in a student in a class, whether you're across the country or even around the world, being able to engage in issues that we're facing as a collective in educating students, that's what we're interested in. Because it's that peer-to-peer, that learning, that thinking, that seeing different perspectives. That's how we expand, right? That we don't get caught in a rut, that we don't just do things the same old, because that's not going to work. We know that. And so the opportunity to engage in this way is what we do. And look forward to speaking with any of you who are interested in exploring this further. And with that, I'll open it up to questions real quickly for those of you who need to jump. And if anybody wants, those of you interested in staying, we can continue, go back to the sim. Glad to hear it. Thank you for your feedback. All right, if anybody has a question, go ahead and unmute, and then we'll just jump right back into the sim. Okay, if you want to open back the sim, we can continue, if those want to continue.
Yeah. All right. So, oh, am I going to go back to the start when I punch this?
Isn't it open in one of your tabs? You have a lot of tabs open. But
Yeah, okay.
Where it was.
Yeah, I'm going to hunt. We'll get it. Let's see. All right, let me see if this one. Okay, there we am. Now I am. Okay, so as I said, I love the conversation. So I'm going to choose creating a learning plan. I have to tell you that one of these, make time for disciplinary action, one of them ends up with all your faculty are retiring this year. So I think that was probably not be a good choice.
Creating learning plans. In conference with several of your teachers and teaching teams, you work to establish measurable, actionable goals. You discuss with each of them the importance of holding high expectations for all students. You encourage them to look for new creative ways of improving their students' performance. You explain that you will follow up on their work to achieve their goals and provide feedback regularly on your observations.
So here we go.
You have not had a very close relationship with students, except those that spend a great deal of time in your office. You ponder ways that you might engage with those who are struggling and possibly even become their advocate. How might you effectively engage with students? Create a Principals Advisory Council, or PAC. The goal of the PAC would be to provide the principal with a sense of how the students feel about their school, learning, and the overall culture of the building. Work with the teachers to help them develop closer relationships with their students. Ask the coach to research best strategies for building closer relationships with students and explore morning circles and student mentoring approaches to integrate into the school programming. Host a lunch with the students once each week. This will give you a chance to get to know them and hear their perspectives and ideas. Host more donuts with dads and coffee with moms to see what parents think. This will allow you to hear their perspectives and perhaps even hear what their children are saying about the school and their teachers.
Okay, take your time. Okay, Nick, you want to put them in groups?
Okay, might just pay, there aren't that many people left. Maybe we just
Okay,
stay and
okay.
talk about it as a unit.
Okay, all right, that's perfect. So either in the chat or out loud, somebody talk about what choice might you make? Somebody unmute. It's very quiet. Okay, Allison, are you there? Want to share? Okay, some of you are chatting that you would establish a pack. And certainly this whole idea here is how the principal really knows the students in the school. And certainly that whole idea of cultivating a systematic way of engaging with students is a viable tool. Others might say, you know, I really want to know the students, but I want to make sure my teachers are closely connected to their students and know them as people. That's also part of the important standard equity foundation. Someone talk besides Kay here. So, is it DeMarie? Would you unmute and share your thinking?
I mean, I'm looking at all of these and I don't want to use any of them. First, I think that the principal needs to get out in the building, in the classrooms, in the lunchroom, and be visible and really see the students interacting with one another, see the faculty interacting with the principal, be a part of all of that. And to be able to create this pack, I would think then if we were going to go with that piece, because I think what could be dangerous is not really if you don't know the students, and you're obviously not out in the building, you're behind your desk, and that's not really how we're leading these days. So to create a community of the right students to talk to in a good mixture, I just want to be out so that I can see them in their element, understand who they are, to get, you know, that feedback. Not that these are bad answers, these are all great suggestions, but I think I would want as a principal and to tell my principals, get out of the office.
Right. And Sherry shared online that whole idea of knowing your teachers and letting your teachers also have good strategies. So again, it could be a combination of these and making sure that teachers are building relations while you're getting to know the staff. So again, being very thoughtful about your decision and not just saying, because other principals have a pack, I'm going to have one. But it's purposeful and it's intentional in that I'm going to get to know students and they're going to help me know other students, but I also want teachers developing relationships. I thought all of you would pick host more donuts with dads and coffees with moms, but no one wanted to talk about that. I don't know.
Probably not going to get, if the faculty and the teachers are saying that the parents aren't involved and the students, I don't know how many you're going to get by just having donuts with dads.
I don't either. Although it's still popular. All right. Any other comments anyone wants to make? I loved kind of when you get into host a lunch with students once a week. Here's sort of where this goes. I'll show you.
Hosting a lunch with students. While you have always greeted students in the hallways, you've decided that you need more time with them. Lunchtime seems a perfect time to just have conversations with students about their lives, the things that matter to them, the books they are reading, and in general, how they feel about school. You've been working with a number of your teachers and teaching teams, and for the most part, most teachers embrace the need for change and initiate plans to improve their personal development. But you are troubled by the 7th grade math team. They aren't taking their own goal setting seriously. You're actually growing very frustrated with this team, and occasionally you have let them know it. Recently, they've started pushing back. This teaching team is convinced that students are the problem and their instruction is fine. They absolutely do not see the connections between their teaching and student learning. In reality, their learning community is just agenda following and note-taking, very compliant. You want to make their work meaningful to them. How might you best accomplish this? Rely on the instructional coach to work with the 7th grade math team. Have the coach work alongside a consultant you found that you believe can help them. The team needs to see a successfully functioning learning community. When they are able to observe a well-functioning learning community, they will recognize their challenges and set meaningful goals for themselves. Ask the 7th grade math team if they would be willing to observe another team in the building. This might encourage them to improve their existing practices and gain new insights. Mandate that they observe the 6th grade math team and align their learning community with the successful practices. You're not sure the 7th grade team is taking you seriously, so provide direction and a deadline.
So we'll just talk about it. Anybody have something that stands out to you as grounded in the research or the standards for professional learning? Okay. Janet, would you mind sharing what you're thinking? Or at the chat box, I'll pick up your comments from there.
Hi, Kate. This is Janet with School Sims.
Perfect. Oh, okay. Would you like to share?
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
So I don't have experience as an educator, but I think that if I had to go with an answer, I would probably go with a third one.
Okay. So, yes, making the effort to say, let's look at a strong team. Let's look at a team that is very successful and has data to show it, because we're not leaving that whole data conversation. So that opens up an invitation, eagerness to build teams across grade levels instead of just in one grade level. And maybe actually that observation can say, oh, I get it now. I get what we're supposed to do. Thank you, Janet. Somebody else? Ezreal? Would you be willing to share?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, awesome.
I think that's a better approach that you have suggested. That's what I think we can do. One can do in such a situation by trying to form a functional team whereby we cut across all the grade level, whereby they can the teachers can observe clearly and see a replica what to follow, a kind of model to follow when they are doing their work.
Yeah. Sometimes we just don't get it. We're so used to following agendas or doing what we've always done that when we say, well, what is your learning community? We think we are one. I hear that everywhere, by the way. And that whole idea of what does a high quality learning community really do? And how do they function so that they take responsibility for student learning, and the outcomes for kids are so dependent on how confident and skilled teachers are, and actually what their attitude is towards students. So that actually being able to see or observe others who are a model of that really is a powerful learning strategy, a learning design that Learning Forward promotes in their work. So I want to thank you for participating in this SIM. Actually, I think Ken is going to ask for feedback, or if you have ideas about what you'd like to see make this stronger, I'd love to know that, because I think we're still learning, and I want to make sure it meets the needs of all. But I also want to thank you for participating, and I'm convinced that these kinds of processes take people into a much deeper level of conversation than most of our approaches to learning for principals. And when principals are highly effective, we know it powerfully impacts the teachers in their building and all the students. So it's passion work for me, and I've loved the opportunity to use the SIM, and I look forward to using it, and I hope you will too. So thanks again, Ken.
Thank you, Kay, very
Thank
much.
you very much.
And just so you know, one of the things we didn't get to, but when you get to the end of the SIM, there is, as Kay had mentioned, a summative feedback report on all the decisions that were made. Again, that we fundamentally believe in the adage that experience is the best teacher, but that really only comes with reflection. Without reflection, we end up putting our hand right back on that stove. And so there can be, depending on how you're deploying it, if you're doing it this way, synchronously, the opportunity to engage in discussion. So there's constant opportunity for reflection throughout. Alternatively, if you're doing it asynchronously, there's still the report at the end. And either way, it does still provide an opportunity to get that overview of all the decisions one after the other and seeing kind of the flow of events, but more from the bird's eye view. Because one of the things you'll notice is that there's no back button. And that's by design in the Sims because there's no mulligans here. You know, as in life, there's no do-overs. You live it and you have to deal with the consequences. And so we want you to deal with the consequences here too. The goal of a Sim is not to get it right. The goal of a Sim is to have an experience. And if you're constantly going back and trying to, you know, oh, no, what if I do this other choice without seeing the totality of it, then obviously you lose that opportunity to engage in the full experience. With that, we're done. So happy to answer any questions. But again, thank you for those of you who stayed. Thank you for your attendance and participation, and love your feedback, as Kay mentioned. And obviously, it's a further discussion in terms of the potential application in your worlds and or new ideas. So I will stay on, happy to stay on if anybody has additional thoughts, comments. But I look forward to seeing you at some point again in the future. Stay tuned for we will be doing probably 2 more webinars before the end of the year. Next month, we'll be doing probably in the middle of the month on end of school year, given that it is the end of school year. And then probably one on, we're looking at doing one from a counseling perspective on school safety as a possibility in June. So we'll keep you posted on those dates. Stay tuned. But otherwise, look forward to any comments, thoughts that you have. But again, thank you, Kay, very much for your collaboration as well as for your delivery today. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Ken. It was fun. Thank you all for coming.